His dog didn't bark when it found the metal door, just stood there, staring at the ground like it already knew what was buried beneath. The wind hit the broken walls just right, making a low whistle through the cracks as Caleb froze mid-step. Bruno's paws scraped once, sharp, metallic, and then stopped. Not digging, not moving, just staring. Caleb felt that old tension crawl up his spine, the kind that never lied. Something wasn't right here, but it was already too late to walk away. What do you think is buried under that house? The wind came down the hollow like it had a purpose, slipping through seams, finding bone. Caleb Hayes stood under the flickering light outside the shelter, shoulders squared, not from pride, just habit. The smell of wet asphalt and diesel hung in the air. He didn't knock again. He'd already heard the answer. Full up. Try Charleston. The man inside had barely looked at him. Caleb didn't argue. He stayed where he was for 3 seconds longer than necessary, eyes moving, not aimless. Left corner of the building, rear exit, narrow alley between brick walls. No movement, no sound, but wind. Clear. He turned. The metal door slammed behind him with a sharp, hollow crack. Caleb's body reacted before his mind did. His shoulders tightened. His right hand curled into a fist, halfway to something that wasn't there anymore. For a fraction of a second, the street wasn't a street. It was dust, heat, the distant thump of something incoming. He blinked. West Virginia. Cold air. Night. Not Afghanistan. He exhaled slow, controlled, in through the nose, out through the mouth, just like they taught, after. A shape moved beside him. Bruno. The German shepherd stood close, almost pressed against Caleb's leg, his fur catching the weak light. The dog didn't look at the shelter, didn't look at the road. His eyes stayed on Caleb, waiting. Caleb gave a small nod, barely noticeable. Yeah, he muttered. We're done here. They started down the road together, boots scraping gravel. No destination, just movement. The town had gone quiet hours ago. A gas station sign buzzed in the distance. Half the letters burned out. A pickup truck passed once, slow, headlights washing over them before disappearing into the dark. Caleb didn't hitch his thumb out, didn't call after it. He kept walking. Bruno stayed tight on his left side, matching pace without needing a word. Every so often, the dog's ears twitched, catching something Caleb couldn't hear. Once, Bruno stopped completely, staring into the trees lining the road. Caleb stopped too. He didn't ask why. They stood there in silence. The trees didn't move. No branches snapped. No footsteps. Just wind threading through bare limbs. Bruno's posture eased. Caleb gave a quiet click of his tongue. They moved on. A mile out, the town lights thinned to nothing. The road narrowed, cracked and uneven. Caleb's breath came out in slow clouds now, visible in the cold. His hands stayed tucked deep in his jacket, but his shoulders never relaxed. Not all the way. They reached an old turnout where the asphalt gave up entirely, turning into dirt and stone. Caleb stepped off the road, scanning the area out of habit. Higher ground to the right, tree line to the left, limited exposure. Good enough. He crouched down, back to a large rock, positioning himself where he could see the road without being seen easily from it. Bruno circled once, then lay down facing the opposite direction, covering the blind side. No command given, none needed. Caleb pulled his jacket tighter and leaned his head back against the stone. His eyes didn't close. Not fully. They never did. Somewhere in the distance, a loose piece of metal clanged, sharp, sudden. Caleb's eyes snapped open. For a split second, his breathing hitched. His muscles tensed, ready to move, to drop, to... Nothing followed. No second sound, no echo of boots, no shouted orders. Just wind again. He stayed still a moment longer, letting his breathing settle back into rhythm. Bruno hadn't moved. The dog's ears were up, but his body stayed grounded, steady. Caleb watched him, then gave a small nod. All right. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. Time blurred when you stopped measuring it. The cold crept in slowly, patient. Caleb shifted once, adjusting his position, careful not to expose too much movement. He glanced down at Bruno. The dog's eyes were still open, always watching. Caleb let out a breath that almost turned into something else. A laugh, maybe, or something close to it. Guess it's just us, he said quietly. Bruno's tail gave a single, slow thump against the dirt. Caleb looked back toward the road they'd left behind. He didn't expect the door to open, didn't expect anyone to come calling his name. That part of life had been stripped away piece by piece, long before tonight. He adjusted his position again, settling in for what would pass as sleep. Behind his eyes, shapes flickered. Rotor blades, dust clouds. A voice shouting coordinates he could still recite without thinking. He pushed it down, focused on the cold air, the ground beneath him, the steady presence at his side. Somewhere ahead, beyond the hills and the trees, the road curved deeper into land no one really wanted. Caleb didn't know it yet, but that was the direction they would go. And Bruno, without lifting his head, turned his gaze toward the darkness waiting there. Morning came slow, gray light slipping through the trees like it wasn't sure it belonged there. Caleb was already awake. He hadn't really slept. Not the kind that resets anything. Just hours of stillness, listening, counting sounds, measuring distance between them. The road was quiet. Bruno stood first, stretching out his front legs, then shaking off the cold. He didn't wander, didn't sniff aimlessly like most dogs would. He waited. Caleb pushed himself up, joints stiff, eyes already scanning the ridgeline. No movement. No tire tracks from the night. Nothing had come down that road after they stopped. Good. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft at the edges. A listing. Handwritten directions. Price circled twice. Too cheap. He had stared at it for a long time yesterday before deciding. Not because it was a good deal, because it was the only deal. He looked down the dirt path ahead. Let's go see what we bought, he said. Bruno moved first this time. The trail climbed, narrow and uneven, cutting through dense trees that blocked most of the light. Fallen branches snapped under Caleb's boots, each sound too loud in the quiet. He adjusted his pace, slower now, softer steps. Habit. The path curved once, then again, before opening into a small clearing. That's when he saw it. The house leaned. Not dramatically. Not like it was about to fall over, but enough that your eyes kept coming back to it, trying to correct something that didn't sit right. One side sagged lower than the other. The roof dipped like it had given up halfway through holding itself together. The porch tilted forward, boards warped and gray with age. Windows stared out, dark and empty, no curtains, no glass in one of them, just a hollow opening. Caleb stopped at the edge of the clearing. He didn't step closer right away. His gaze moved across the structure, piece by piece. Roofline, entry points, sight lines. No visible movement inside. No fresh tracks leading up to the door. The air felt still. Too still. Bruno reached the edge of the clearing, then stopped. He didn't go any further. His ears lifted. His body went rigid, not aggressive, alert. Caleb watched him. Go on, he said quietly. Bruno didn't move. Caleb stepped forward, slow, boots sinking slightly into damp earth. He didn't look at the door first. He circled left, keeping distance, eyes on the ground. Tracks, old, faded, hard to read, no recent impressions. He came around to the front of the house, stopping at the base of the crooked porch. One of the support beams had shifted, leaving a gap between wood and stone foundation. The kind of gap something could crawl through. He crouched, peering into the shadow beneath. Nothing moved. Still, he stayed there a moment longer. Then he stood. The front door hung slightly ajar, one hinge pulling away from the frame. It creaked as the wind nudged it open another inch. Caleb didn't touch it. He stepped to the side instead, positioning himself where he could see inside without standing directly in the doorway. The interior was dark, dust hanging in the air, catching the weak light. Furniture shapes under torn sheets. No sound. He waited, counted 5 seconds. 10. Bruno shifted behind him, letting out a low breath but not stepping forward. Caleb reached out slowly and pushed the door the rest of the way open. It groaned, long and low, echoing through the house like something waking up. He stepped inside. The floor creaked under his weight, but held. He paused just inside, letting his eyes adjust. Left, clear. Right, clear. Ahead, hallway, narrow, shadowed. He moved one step deeper, then another. Bruno still hadn't followed. Caleb glanced back. The dog stood at the threshold, muscles tight, eyes fixed somewhere past Caleb, toward the back of the house, or maybe beyond it. Bruno. Nothing. The dog's ears twitched once. Then he looked past the house toward the trees behind it. Not inside. Outside. Caleb followed his gaze. There was nothing there, just a slope dropping off into thicker woods, brush and rock and tangled roots. But Bruno didn't look away. Caleb watched him for a long second, then turned back to the house. "All right," he murmured. "We'll check that later." He stepped further inside, boots leaving faint prints in the dust. The air smelled stale, old wood, damp insulation. But beneath that, faint, almost gone, was something else. Metal. Caleb stopped. Just for a second. Then he kept moving. Behind him, Bruno finally stepped over the threshold, but he didn't follow Caleb into the house. He crossed the room once, then angled straight toward the back door, and scratched. Once. Then again. Caleb didn't answer right away. He watched Bruno's paw hit the wood a third time, softer now, controlled. Not panic, not impatience. A signal. Caleb moved across the room, boots stirring thin trails of dust. He didn't rush, didn't ignore the rest of the house either. His eyes flicked once toward the hallway, then back to Bruno. "All right," he said quietly. The back door stuck halfway when he pulled it. Swollen wood, warped frame. He leaned his weight into it, and it gave with a sharp crack, swinging open into the cold morning air. Bruno stepped out immediately. No hesitation this time. Caleb followed, pausing just outside the doorway. The land behind the house dropped off faster than it looked from the front. The ground sloped down into thicker brush, tangled with roots and rock, the kind of terrain that swallowed sound. Bruno was already moving, not running, tracking, head low, tail steady, ears forward. Caleb watched the line he was taking. Not random. He closed the door behind him halfway, enough to break the wind, and started after him. Each step down the slope had to be placed. Loose soil shifted under his boots. He adjusted his weight without thinking, keeping low, keeping balance. Bruno stopped near a shallow depression in the ground. Nothing dramatic. Just a dip where water might have collected once. Leaves gathered thicker there, darker. The dog circled it once, then twice. Then he lowered his nose and stayed still. Caleb didn't step in. He stayed just outside the edge, scanning the surrounding area first. Trees. Ridgeline. No movement. No broken branches fresh enough to matter. He crouched slowly. "Show me," he said. Bruno pawed at the leaves. Once, then stopped. Caleb leaned forward, brushing aside the top layer with his hand. Cold dirt. Damp. Packed tighter than the rest of the ground around it. He pressed down. Solid. Not rock. Something underneath. He sat back on his heels, eyes narrowing slightly. "Not today," he murmured. Bruno looked up at him. Caleb gave a small shake of his head. "Not yet." He stood, wiping his hands on his jacket. His gaze drifted back toward the house. From here, the crooked frame leaned even more, like it was watching them, or waiting. A gust of wind pushed through the trees, carrying a low whistle that threaded through the branches. Caleb's shoulders tensed for half a second before he let it pass. Bruno didn't move from the spot. Caleb clicked his tongue. The dog hesitated, just a beat, then stepped back, falling in beside him. They made their way up the slope again, slower this time. Halfway up, Caleb stopped. Something didn't line up. He turned, looking back down at the depression. The leaves they'd moved had already begun to settle again, wind nudging them into place. But the ground around it, too even, too flat, like it had been shaped, not formed. Caleb held that thought for a second longer than necessary, then let it go. For now. Inside, the house felt colder than before. Bruno stayed close this time, but he didn't relax. He moved room to room, checking corners, pausing at doorways, then moving on, clearing. Caleb worked through the space methodically. Windows first, what was left of them. One frame had been boarded up from the inside. Old nails, rusted, but not completely gone. He pressed against it. Didn't budge. Strange. He moved to the kitchen. Cabinets half open, contents long gone. A sink stained dark with time. Pipes exposed beneath. No water. No power. But the place wasn't wrecked. Not like most abandoned homes he'd seen. It felt paused. Like whoever left had done it on purpose. Bruno stopped near the center of the room. He didn't sit. Didn't lie down. Just stood there, head slightly tilted, listening. Caleb followed his gaze. Nothing. Just silence. Then, a faint sound. Not from outside. From somewhere inside the house. A soft shift. Wood adjusting. Or something moving weight from one place to another. Caleb froze. His breathing slowed, controlled. Bruno didn't bark, didn't growl. He leaned forward slightly, focused. Caleb's eyes tracked toward the hallway. Dark, narrow. He took one step toward it. The floor creaked under his boot, louder than it should have. The sound inside the house stopped. Just like that. Silence dropped back in, thick and heavy. Caleb didn't move for a full 10 seconds, then 15. Nothing followed. He eased back, just half a step, shifting his angle instead of pushing forward. "Later," he said under his breath. Bruno glanced at him, then back toward the hallway, but he didn't move toward it. Not yet. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing against the walls, making the house groan softly in response. Caleb turned his head toward the back of the house, toward the slope, toward the place Bruno had found. Whatever was here, it wasn't just the house, and it wasn't finished with them. Not even close. Caleb didn't go near the hallway again that afternoon. He moved the other way, back outside. The air felt sharper now, colder than it should have been for the hour. The wind carried a low, steady hum through the trees, like something far off, but constant. Bruno didn't need to be called. He was already heading down the slope. Caleb followed, slower this time, more deliberate. His boots avoided the same loose patches from before, choosing firmer ground. He didn't look at the house once on the way down. All his attention stayed forward, on the dip in the earth. Bruno reached it first again. Same position, same stillness. The dog didn't circle this time. He went straight to the center of the depression and began to dig. Not frantic, focused. Each stroke of his paws pushed damp soil backward in clean, controlled motions. No wasted movement. Caleb stopped at the edge, watched. He didn't step in yet. He let Bruno work. The sound of claws against dirt was steady, rhythmic. Dirt thudded behind him in small piles. The hole deepened faster than it should have. Bruno hit something. The sound cut through the air sharp and clean. Clank. Not rock, not wood. Metal. Bruno froze. Caleb's body reacted instantly. His hand lifted slightly, palm open. Easy. The dog stepped back without taking his eyes off the hole. Caleb moved in. Slow, every step measured. He crouched beside the opening, brushing away loose soil with his hands. The metal surface revealed itself piece by piece, flat, cold, and smooth despite the dirt packed against it. A plate. No. A hatch. He cleared more of it, exposing edges that ran too straight to be natural, bolts set into the corners. Rusted, but intact. Caleb leaned closer. The faint smell hit him again. Metal. Old, but not forgotten. He ran his fingers along the edge. There. A seam. He sat back on his heels, breathing slow. Bruno let out a low rumble behind him. Not aggressive, just aware. Caleb didn't look back. Yeah, he said quietly. I see it. He scanned the area again, slower this time. Not just trees and ridgeline. Ground patterns, broken brush, any sign that someone else had been here recently. Nothing. Too clean. That bothered him more. He leaned forward again, gripping the edge of the metal plate. It didn't move. Not with bare hands. He let go. Sat back again. Waited. The wind shifted, pushing through the trees in a long, steady gust. Leaves skittered across the ground, some sliding into the hole, tapping softly against the metal. Caleb watched them settle. His jaw tightened just slightly. He stood. Not now, he said. Bruno looked up at him. Caleb gave a small shake of his head, not without knowing what's under it. He stepped back from the depression, wiping dirt from his hands. His eyes lingered on the hatch for a second longer. Then he turned. Halfway up the slope, he stopped again. Something felt off. He looked back. The hole was still there, the metal plate exposed, dark against the earth. But the angle, it caught the light differently now. Not flat, slightly tilted, like it had been set that way on purpose. Caleb narrowed his eyes, then forced himself to keep moving. Back inside, the house felt tighter, smaller. The walls creaked as the temperature shifted, wood adjusting to the cold pressing in. Caleb moved through the rooms again, slower than before, marking what he'd missed. A corner in the living room where the floor dipped slightly. A section of wall in the hallway that sounded hollow when the wind hit it. Details. He filed them away. Bruno stayed closer now. No wandering. no pulling toward the back door, just shadowing Caleb's movements, step for step. Late afternoon faded into evening without either of them noticing. The light outside dimmed to a dull gray, then darker. Caleb didn't light a fire, didn't turn on anything. He sat in a chair near the front wall, positioned where he could see both the door and the hallway without moving his head. Bruno lay at his feet, not asleep, never fully. The silence stretched. Then, a sound, faint, from outside. Metal, a soft shift, like something settling under weight. Caleb's eyes snapped toward the back of the house. His breathing slowed instantly, controlled. Bruno was already up, head low, ears forward. Caleb didn't speak, didn't move. They listened. The sound didn't come again, but it didn't need to. Caleb knew exactly where it had come from. The hatch. Something down there had just moved, or something had touched it. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the dark hallway leading toward the back. His hand curled slowly, unconsciously, like it was remembering something it used to hold. "Tomorrow," he whispered. But his eyes didn't believe it. Neither did Bruno. Outside, the wind picked up again, and somewhere beneath the ground, something waited. Caleb didn't sleep. He stayed in the chair until the dark softened into gray again, eyes half-lidded but never gone. Every sound mapped itself in his head, the wind, the wood, the quiet spaces between. Bruno didn't lie down. He stood most of the night facing the back of the house, watching. When the light finally came through the broken window, thin and pale, Caleb pushed himself up. His joints protested, but he didn't slow. "All right," he said. Bruno was already moving. They went straight outside. No hesitation this time. The ground behind the house looked different in the morning light. The depression stood out clearer now, edges too defined, the soil around it too evenly packed. Caleb stopped at the top of the slope, scanned. Left ridge, clear. Right tree line, clear. No tracks leading in, no tracks leading out. He moved down. Bruno reached the hatch first and stood over it, not touching, just waiting. Caleb stepped in beside him. The metal plate sat fully exposed now, dirt pushed aside from yesterday. It looked heavier in daylight, thicker, built to last. He crouched and ran his fingers along the edge again. Cold. Solid. There. A recessed handle, nearly invisible under the rust. He brushed it clean, then stopped. His head lifted slightly. Listening. Nothing. Just wind. He leaned back, sitting on his heels, then nodded once. "On me." He gripped the handle and pulled. The hatch didn't move. He shifted his stance, planted his boots wider, and pulled again. Steady pressure, not a jerk. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a low, grinding sound. Metal scraping against metal. The hatch lifted, slow, heavy. Air rushed out from below, stale and dry, carrying a faint smell that didn't belong to the forest. Old machinery. Bruno stepped back half a pace, ears forward. Caleb held the hatch open with one hand, peering into the dark space below. A ladder. Steel rungs disappearing straight down into shadow. No light. No sound. Just depth. Caleb let the hatch rest open, propped against the edge. He didn't climb in. Not yet. He leaned closer, listening again. Nothing moved. No echo, no shift. Dead quiet. Bruno moved to the edge and looked down, then back at Caleb. Waiting. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flashlight. Dented, scratched, but working. He clicked it on and angled the beam downward. The light cut through dust, revealing concrete walls, close and narrow. A bunker, not improvised, not recent, built. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "Stay," he said. Bruno didn't argue, but he didn't step back either. Caleb swung one leg over the edge and found the first rung, tested it, solid. He started down, each step measured, slow. His weight kept close to the ladder, minimizing movement. The light stayed fixed below, never swinging wildly. 5 rungs, 10, 15. The air cooled as he descended, pressing in around him. The smell of metal grew stronger. At the bottom, his boots met concrete. He didn't step away immediately. He stayed on the last rung, sweeping the light across the floor. Clear. He stepped off. The space was smaller than he expected. Low ceiling, reinforced walls, no signs of collapse. But everything was intact. Too intact. A metal table stood against one wall. Shelving units lined another. Boxes stacked neatly, not scattered. Caleb moved forward, one slow step at a time. Clearing. Left corner. Empty. Right side. Shelves. No movement. He exhaled quietly. Bruno dropped down behind him without warning. Caleb turned sharply, then stopped when he saw the dog already moving past him, nose low, scanning the space faster than any human could. "Stay close," Caleb said. Bruno ignored the command. He went straight to the far wall. Caleb followed. The table held old equipment, dust-covered but not corroded. A radio unit, dead. Wires coiled neatly beside it, not abandoned in a hurry, packed, left behind on purpose. Caleb's light shifted to the shelves. Metal boxes, labeled, faded ink. He stepped closer, brushing one clean enough to read. Coordinates, grid references. His eyes narrowed. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's not nothing." Behind him, Bruno let out a low sound. Not a growl, a signal. Caleb turned. The dog stood at the far wall, paw pressed against a section of concrete that looked no different from the rest. Caleb stepped closer. Bruno scratched once, then stopped. Caleb ran his hand across the surface. Smooth. Until a slight edge. Barely there. A seam hidden in the wall. He stepped back, studying it, then looked at the rest of the bunker again. This place wasn't forgotten. It was hidden. Deliberately. He turned back toward the ladder, eyes lifting to the light above. The world outside felt very far away now, and whatever this was, it had been waiting a long time. Bruno looked up at him. Caleb gave a slow nod. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We're not alone in this." Caleb didn't touch the hidden panel right away. He stood there, flashlight steady, watching the line where concrete met shadow. The seam was too clean, too deliberate. Someone had built this to be found, just not easily. Bruno shifted his weight, pressing closer to the wall, nose hovering inches from the seam. He didn't scratch again, didn't force it. He waited. Caleb moved past him instead. "Not first," he muttered. He turned back toward the shelves. Metal boxes. Sealed. Labeled in a way that didn't belong in any civilian storage. No brand markings. No dates anyone outside a system would understand. He picked one up, heavier than it looked. Set it on the table. The latch resisted at first, then gave with a dull snap. The lid creaked open. Inside, papers. Not scattered. Filed. Clipped. Organized. Caleb flipped through the first stack slowly. Grid maps. Coordinates marked in tight, precise handwriting. Symbols layered over terrain. Some he recognized, some he didn't. But enough of them. Enough of them felt familiar. His jaw tightened. AO markings, he said under his breath. Not standard issue. Not anything they trained the average unit on. He set that stack aside and reached deeper into the box. Another folder, thicker. He opened it. Numbers, rows of them. Account strings, routing codes, names that didn't match locations. Locations that didn't match anything real. Financial. Not small. Not clean. Caleb stared at the page a second longer than he meant to, then closed it halfway. All right, he said quietly. Bruno's ears twitched. Caleb looked over at him. You see it too. Bruno didn't move. Caleb exhaled through his nose and went to the next box. Same structure. Different contents. Photographs this time. Grainy. Taken from distance. Long lenses. People. Vehicles. A convoy in desert terrain. Burned out on one side of the frame. Another image showed a compound, walls blown inward, dust frozen midair. Caleb's hand stopped on that one. His thumb brushed the edge of the photo. For a second, heat. Sound. The low chop of rotor blades cutting the night. A voice in his ear, sharp, urgent. Contact left. Move! Move! Caleb blinked. The bunker snapped back into place. Cold. Silent. His hand tightened slightly on the photograph. Then he set it down. Bruno had moved closer. Not to the table. To him. The dog pressed his shoulder lightly against Caleb's leg. Grounding. Caleb let out a slow breath. Yeah, he murmured. I'm here. He stepped away from the photos. Back to the shelves. The next container wasn't labeled. No markings at all. That alone made it stand out. He lifted it carefully and set it on the table. The lid opened easier than the others. Inside, bundles, wrapped tight, paper bands. Caleb peeled one open. Bearer bonds, old but not worthless. His eyes scanned the print. His breathing didn't change, but something behind it did. He set it back, opened another, more, stacked deep. Not a handful, not a stash, a system. Bruno let out a low sound again, softer this time. Caleb nodded once, almost to himself. Yeah, he said. That's why. He closed the box slowly, not rushing, not reacting, just processing. He turned back toward the hidden seam in the wall, walked to it, ran his fingers along the edge again. This time he didn't hesitate. He pressed. Nothing. Shifted his hand lower, pressed again. A soft click. Barely audible. The panel moved. Not outward. Inward. Just enough to break the seal. Bruno stepped back instinctively, giving space. Caleb eased the panel open. Behind it, a smaller compartment. Tighter. More controlled. Inside sat a single metal case. Different from the others. Cleaner. Less wear. Caleb reached in and lifted it out. Set it on the table. It had a lock. Not complex, but intentional. He studied it for a second, then reached into his pocket. A small multi-tool unfolded in his hand, movements practiced without thought. A few adjustments, pressure in the right place. The lock gave. He opened it. Inside, more documents. But these weren't field maps, not raw data. These were summaries, typed, clean, final. His eyes moved across the first page, then stopped. A name. Not just any name. A man he hadn't thought about in years. A man who had disappeared after a mission that never made it into official reports. Caleb's grip tightened on the edge of the case. The air in the bunker felt thinner now. He flipped the page. More references. More confirmation. This wasn't random. This wasn't forgotten. This was buried. Bruno stepped closer again, nose hovering near the open case. Caleb didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the page. "Yeah," he said quietly. "This wasn't supposed to be found." Above them, faint and distant, something shifted. Not inside the bunker. Outside. Caleb's head lifted instantly. Bruno froze. Both of them listening. The sound didn't come again. But it didn't need to. Caleb closed the case. Slow. Deliberate. "Time to move," he said, because whatever had been left down here wasn't the only thing that knew about it anymore. Caleb moved fast, but not rushed. There was a difference. He shut the metal case, slid it back into the compartment, then paused. His eyes moved across the bunker one more time, cataloging positions, exits, blind angles, nothing out of place. That bothered him. "Up," he said. Bruno didn't wait. The dog jumped for the ladder and climbed with practiced precision, claws gripping metal rungs without slipping. Caleb followed right behind, one hand on the rail, the other keeping the flashlight steady below. Halfway up, he stopped. Listened. Wind above, branches shifting. No voices. No engines. He kept climbing. When he reached the surface, the light hit him hard, brighter than before, like the world had sharpened while they were underground. Bruno was already circling the clearing, wider this time. Not just the depression, the perimeter. Caleb stepped out, pulled the hatch closed, and dragged loose soil back over it with his boot. Not perfect, not invisible, but enough. Bruno came back, slow, head low. Caleb watched him. "What did you get?" The dog didn't answer, of course, but his posture did. Tension through the shoulders, weight forward, not fear, alert. Caleb turned in a slow circle. Tree line, slope, ridge, everything looked the same. That meant nothing. He moved back toward the house. Inside, the air felt different now. Not colder, tighter. Caleb shut the door behind him and slid a chair under the handle without thinking. His eyes went to the window, then the hallway, then back again. Bruno took position near the back wall, watching. Caleb went to the table and pulled the metal case back out. Set it down. Opened it again. This time he didn't flip pages. He went straight to the name, stared at it. Longer than before. Colonel David Mercer. He said it out loud. The sound of it settled heavy in the room. Bruno's ears twitched at the tone, not the words. Caleb leaned back slightly in the chair. For a moment, the house disappeared. Heat replaced the cold. Rotor wash hammered against his chest. Sand hit his face like needles. Night vision green washed everything in ghost light. "Mercer, we don't have clearance." "We have the window," the voice cut back. Calm, controlled, always calm. Caleb blinked. The memory snapped away. The table returned. The case, the name still there. He rubbed his thumb across the page like he could erase it. Didn't. "Disappeared," he muttered. That's what they said. No body, no report. Just gone. And now, this. Caleb flipped the page. More references. Operations that didn't exist on paper. Locations that had been scrubbed clean. His breathing stayed even, but his fingers slowed. This wasn't something a man forgot. This was something buried. Bruno stepped closer again, pressed his head briefly against Caleb's knee. Not asking, just there. Caleb reached down without looking and rested his hand on the dog's neck. "Steady, yeah," he said quietly. "I remember." He closed the case, set it aside, then stood, moved to the window. The trees stood still now. Wind had dropped off. The slope behind the house looked empty. Too empty. He shifted his angle slightly, using the reflection in the glass to scan behind him without turning his head. Clear. For now, he exhaled slowly. Then, a flicker. Movement. Far down the dirt road. Caleb didn't move. Didn't react. Just watched. A shape appeared between the trees. Dark. Low. Then clearer. A vehicle. Not local. Too clean. Too controlled in the way it moved up the incline. Bruno saw it too. He didn't bark. Didn't move toward the door. He just shifted closer to Caleb's leg, muscles tightening. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Yeah," he said under his breath. That didn't take long. The vehicle slowed as it approached the house. Didn't stop right away. It rolled past the edge of the clearing, then adjusted, turning just enough to face the front. Positioning, not random. Caleb stepped back from the window, out of direct sight. His body moved on instinct now. Angles, lines of fire, entry points. Bruno followed him without a sound. The engine cut. Silence dropped again. A car door opened. Then another. Footsteps. Measured. Not rushed. Caleb didn't reach for a weapon. There wasn't one. But his hands were ready anyway. His breathing slowed further. Bruno lowered his head, weight forward. The knock came a few seconds later. 3 times. Even. Polite. Caleb didn't answer. Not yet. He glanced once toward the back of the house, then back to the door. His voice came out low, controlled. "Stay behind me." Bruno didn't need the order. Another knock. Same rhythm. A voice followed. "Mr. Hayes?" Caleb's eyes hardened slightly. He hadn't given that name to anyone out here. Not yet. He stepped forward. Slow. Each step placed carefully, like the ground might shift under him if he rushed. His hand closed around the door handle. Didn't open it, just held it. And for a brief second, he wasn't in the mountains anymore. He was back in a place where doors opened to things you couldn't take back. Caleb blinked once, then opened the door, and whatever had followed him from the past was now standing on his porch. The man on the porch didn't look like a threat. That was the first problem. Mid-40s, clean jacket, no mud on his boots despite the road, hair trimmed too neat for this part of West Virginia. His eyes, though, they moved too much. Taking in the doorframe, the hinges, the angles behind Caleb's shoulder. Not a tourist. Not lost. "Mr. Hayes," the man repeated, offering a thin smile. "Didn't mean to startle you." Caleb didn't return it. "Then don't," he said. A second man stepped into view behind him, coming around from the side of the vehicle. Taller, broader, hands in his pockets, but not relaxed. Positioning. Caleb shifted his weight slightly, blocking the doorway just enough. Bruno stayed behind him, silent, but not hidden. The first man's gaze dropped for half a second, just long enough to register the dog. Then it came back up. "Nice place," he said casually, glancing past Caleb toward the interior. "Bit off the grid, though. Works for me." A pause. The wind moved through the trees again, low and steady. The 2 men didn't react to it. They weren't listening to the environment. They were watching him. "We're here about the property," the first man said. "You bought it recently." Paperwork went through fast. Caleb didn't blink. Cash deals do that. Another small smile. "Yeah, they do." The second man stepped closer now, just enough to close distance, but not enough to cross a line. Not yet. "We represent a party interested in acquiring land in this area," he said. His voice was lower, more direct. "Your house sits right in the middle of it." Caleb let a beat pass. "Then go around it." The first man chuckled softly, like that was amusing. "We could," he said, "but it'd be easier if we didn't have to." He reached into his jacket slowly. Caleb's shoulders tightened, just a fraction. The man stopped mid-motion. "Relax," he said. "Just paperwork." He pulled out a folder, held it out. Caleb didn't take it, didn't even look at it. "What's the number?" Caleb asked. The man blinked. "Excuse me?" "The price," Caleb said. "You didn't come all the way out here without one." Another pause. Then the smile came back. 100,000. Too fast. Too clean. Too high for a place like this. Caleb's eyes didn't change. Not enough. The second man shifted slightly behind him. Not surprised. Expecting negotiation. The first man tilted his head. "All right," he said. 200. Caleb shook his head once. "No." The smile faded. "Just a little." "You sure about that?" the man asked. "Because this isn't really about the house." Caleb didn't answer. The silence stretched long enough to say everything. The man exhaled slowly, then tucked the folder back into his jacket. His eyes moved again. Not scanning now. Measuring. "You've been doing some digging," he said. Not a question. Caleb's hand tightened just slightly against the doorframe. Bruno's posture changed. Subtle. Weight shifted forward. The second man noticed. His gaze dropped again. Longer this time. "Good dog," he muttered. Bruno didn't react. Didn't blink. The first man took a small step closer. Close enough now that Caleb could see the faint scar along his jawline. Old. Clean. Not accidental. "You don't want to be involved in this," he said quietly. "Trust me." Caleb met his eyes. "I already am." The man studied him for a second, then nodded once, like that confirmed something. "All right," he said. "We tried the easy way." He stepped back. The second man followed, both of them turning toward the vehicle. Before he opened the door, the first man glanced back one more time. His eyes went to Bruno. Held there. Too long. Then back to Caleb. "Next time," he said, "we won't knock." They got in. The engine started. The SUV reversed slowly, then turned and headed back down the dirt road, tires crunching over gravel and frozen earth. Caleb didn't move until the sound was gone. Completely gone. Only then did he shut the door. Locked it. Bruno moved to the window, watching the direction the vehicle had gone. Caleb stepped back from the door, his breathing steady but deeper now. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "That's what this is." He turned toward the back of the house. Toward the slope. Toward the hatch buried under dirt. The pieces lined up now. Too clean. Too fast. They hadn't come looking for land. They had come looking for what was under it. Bruno stepped away from the window and came to his side, pressed close. Caleb rested his hand briefly on the dog's neck. Grounding. "Tonight," he said. Bruno's ears twitched. Caleb's eyes hardened slightly. We don't wait anymore. Outside, the wind died completely. The woods went still, and for the first time since he arrived, the silence felt like something was watching back. Caleb didn't wait for night. He prepared for it. The sun dipped behind the ridge, shadows stretching long across the slope, and the temperature dropped fast. The house creaked as it cooled, wood pulling tight against old nails. Inside, Caleb moved without wasted motion. He killed every light source he didn't need, closed the front curtains, what was left of them, just enough to break silhouettes. Then he walked the perimeter. Door, window, back wall. He paused at each one, listening before moving on. Bruno followed close, matching pace, stopping when Caleb stopped, moving when he moved. No leash, no commands needed. At the back of the house, Caleb knelt near the door and rested his hand against the wood. Cold. Still. He leaned his head just enough to listen past it. Nothing. He stayed there a second longer anyway, then stood. Time, he said quietly. Bruno's ears flicked forward. They stepped outside. The woods had gone quiet again. No wind now, no distant movement. Just the heavy kind of stillness that made every small sound carry too far. Caleb moved down the slope, slower than before. Lower. Each step placed carefully, avoiding loose patches, minimizing noise. His body stayed angled, never fully exposed to the open line. Bruno moved ahead, then stopped halfway down, turned back, waited. Caleb adjusted his path slightly, coming up on the depression from the side instead of straight on. Angles. Always angles. They reached the hatch. Caleb didn't touch it. Not yet. He crouched beside it, hand hovering just above the dirt. Then Bruno froze. No growl, no bark. Just still. Caleb didn't look at him. Didn't need to. His body already knew contact. He shifted his weight slowly, turning his head just enough to catch the tree line in his peripheral. Movement. Low. Careful. Not an animal. Too controlled. Caleb exhaled slowly through his nose. His voice dropped to a whisper. Back. Bruno didn't move. The shape in the trees paused. Then another. Two. Different positions. Not together. Caleb's eyes tracked both without turning his head. They were closing distance. Slow. Thinking they hadn't been seen. Caleb let his hand drop lightly against the dirt near the hatch. Grounded himself. Counted. 1, 2, 3. A third figure shifted behind the first. Caleb's jaw tightened. 3, he murmured. Bruno's weight shifted forward. Caleb's hand snapped down, fingers brushing the dog's shoulder. Hold. The dog froze. Every muscle locked, but he didn't move. The first man stepped into the edge of the clearing. Same jacket, same controlled walk. The one from the porch. He didn't call out this time. Didn't pretend. He moved straight toward the depression. The second man circled wider, angling to the side. The third stayed back. Overwatch. Caleb's eyes flicked between them. Patterns. Positions. They weren't guessing anymore. They knew exactly where to go. The first man reached the edge of the hatch, looked down, smiled faintly. Thought so, he said under his breath. Caleb moved, not toward them. Sideways. Breaking line. Bruno moved with him instantly, silent as shadow. The second man caught it first. His head snapped toward Caleb's position. Too late. Bruno launched. No warning. No sound. Just movement. fast. He hit the man at knee level, teeth clamping onto fabric and muscle, dragging him off balance. The man went down hard, breath knocked out in a sharp grunt. "Dog!" The first man spun, reaching for something under his jacket. Caleb closed distance. 2 steps. No hesitation. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking him backward into the dirt beside the hatch. The third man shouted from the trees, too far to act clean. Caleb didn't stay. He grabbed Bruno's collar and pulled. "Move!" Bruno released instantly, limping half a step but keeping pace. They broke away from the clearing, cutting uphill at an angle instead of straight back to the house. Unpredictable. Behind them, voices, shouting, footsteps crashing through brush. Caleb didn't look back. Didn't need to. He could hear distance closing. Bruno stumbled once. Caleb felt it. Saw the dark patch spreading along the dog's shoulder. Blood. "Keep going," Caleb said. Not loud, not panicked, just steady. They reached the back of the house. Caleb didn't go inside. He cut past it, circling wide, using the structure as cover instead of shelter. Bruno stayed with him, breathing heavier now, but still moving. The voices behind them slowed, then stopped. The men had reached the house, searching, expecting. Caleb crouched behind a fallen section of fence, pulling Bruno down beside him. The dog's chest rose and fell faster now. Blood soaked into his fur, dark and thick. Caleb pressed his hand against the wound, firm, controlled. Bruno didn't whine, didn't pull away, just held still. "Yeah," Caleb whispered. "I got you." The house stood quiet in the distance, dark, empty, but no longer safe. Caleb's eyes lifted toward the ridge beyond it. A new direction. Not the one they came from. Not the one the men expected. He shifted his weight, preparing to move again. Bruno pushed himself up beside him. Still ready, even now. Caleb gave a small nod. "Good boy." Behind them, a flashlight beam cut through the trees near the house, searching, closer than before. Caleb turned away from it, toward the dark. "Let's go," and this time, they didn't go back. The ridge was steeper than it looked from below. Loose shale shifted under Caleb's boots as he climbed, one hand gripping a low branch, the other steadying Bruno when the dog faltered. Blood marked their path. Not much, but enough. Caleb didn't try to hide it. Not yet. Distance first, then control. They crested the ridge and dropped down the far side, into thicker woods where the ground softened and the trees grew tighter together. Visibility dropped fast. Good. Caleb slowed, listened. Nothing behind them. No crashing brush. No voices. But that didn't mean they were safe. He moved another 50 yards before stopping near a fallen log, half covered in moss. "Here." Bruno sank down without being told. Only now did the dog let his weight fully settle. Caleb dropped beside him, hands already moving. He pulled off his jacket, tore the inner lining free with a quick, practiced motion. No hesitation, no wasted effort. He pressed it against the wound. Firm. Bruno flinched once, then stilled. "Stay with me," Caleb said quietly. The dog's ears flicked. Still there. Caleb leaned closer, inspecting the injury. Teeth had torn through muscle, but not deep enough to hit bone. Blood heavy, but not pulsing. Good. He shifted the pressure, wrapping the fabric tight around the shoulder. His fingers worked fast, not rushed. Just known. For a second, the woods disappeared again. Dust. Heat. A man on the ground, shouting through clenched teeth. "Medic!" Caleb's hands moving the same way. Pressure. Wrap. Hold. Keep him breathing. Caleb blinked. The forest came back. Cold. Quiet. Bruno's breathing slowed under his hands. Yeah, Caleb murmured. Still here. He tied the makeshift bandage off and leaned back slightly. Listened again. Nothing. But the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded papers he'd taken from the bunker. Not all of them. Just enough. He stared at the names, at the numbers, at the lines that didn't belong in any report he'd ever filed. Mercer, he said under his breath. Bruno lifted his head slightly at the sound. Caleb looked out through the trees. They're not here for the house, he said quietly. They're here to clean it, erase it, like it never existed. His jaw tightened. Not this time. He folded the papers back up and slid them inside his shirt. Close. Protected. Then he looked down at Bruno. The dog was watching him. Not weak, not broken, just waiting for the next move. Caleb gave a small nod. All right. He pushed himself to his feet, slower this time. Muscles stiff, age catching up in the quiet moments between action. He didn't ignore it, just worked through it. He scanned the slope below them. Different direction now. Not the house, not the road. A narrow trail cut between the trees, barely visible unless you knew how to look. Runoff path. Old. Unused. Perfect. Caleb started down it. Bruno followed, favoring his injured side but keeping pace. They moved for nearly an hour without stopping. No straight lines, no obvious patterns. Crossed a shallow stream twice to break scent. Climbed over rock instead of around it. Caleb didn't think about it. His body just remembered. When the trees finally thinned, a structure came into view ahead. Small, weathered, but standing. A sheriff's outpost. Not much more than a single-story building with a flagpole out front and a rusted truck parked beside it. Caleb slowed. Bruno stayed close. The place looked quiet. Too quiet. Caleb didn't approach directly. He circled wide first, staying in the tree line, watching. No movement. No vehicles other than the truck. No fresh tracks leading in. He waited, counted, listened, then moved. Up the path. Bruno at his side. Caleb reached the door and knocked once. Firm. Waited. Nothing. He knocked again. This time a sound inside. Movement. A chair scraping. The door opened a crack. An older man stood there. Gray hair, lined face, eyes sharp despite the years. He took one look at Caleb, then Bruno, then the blood. His expression didn't change. "Sheriff's office," he said. "What do you need?" Caleb held his gaze. "A place to sit," he said, "and 5 minutes of your time." The sheriff studied him for a second longer, then stepped back. "Come in." Caleb didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. Bruno followed. The door closed behind them with a solid click, and for the first time since the night began, Caleb allowed himself to stop moving. Not relax, not yet, but stop. The sheriff grabbed a med kit from the wall and set it on the table. "Dog first," he said. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah." As the sheriff worked, quiet and efficient, Caleb reached into his shirt and pulled out the folded papers, set them on the table. The sheriff glanced at them, then back at Caleb. "You want to tell me what this is?" Caleb shook his head slightly. "No," he said. then met his eyes. "I want to show you." Outside, the wind picked up again, and somewhere back in the woods, men were still searching. The sheriff didn't speak at first. He finished wrapping Bruno's shoulder with steady hands, tightening the bandage just enough to stop the bleeding without cutting circulation. The dog didn't flinch, didn't even look away. "Good animal," the sheriff muttered. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah." The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old wood. A heater in the corner clicked as it struggled to keep up with the cold, pressing against the walls. The sheriff wiped his hands on a cloth and finally turned to the papers on the table. He didn't rush. Didn't flip through them fast like someone looking for a headline. He read, line by line. Caleb stood by the window, angled just enough to see outside without showing himself. The road remained empty. Snow drifted lightly across the dirt, covering tracks faster than expected. Good, but not permanent. Behind him, the sheriff let out a slow breath. "This isn't local," he said. "No," Caleb replied. The sheriff flipped another page. "These account numbers. Offshore. Layered transfers. Shells on top of shells." He tapped one section with his finger. "This kind of money doesn't just disappear." Caleb didn't turn around. It didn't. The sheriff's eyes lifted slightly. "Then why is it here?" Caleb paused, then answered, "Because someone made it disappear." Silence stretched between them. The heater clicked again. Bruno shifted on the floor, adjusting his weight but staying alert, eyes half open, tracking every small movement. The sheriff leaned back slightly, looking at Caleb now instead of the documents. "You know what this is, don't you?" Caleb finally turned, met his gaze. "Black funds," he said. "Contracts that never made it into reports. Operations that didn't exist on paper." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "And that number at the bottom?" Caleb didn't need to look. He already knew. "Rough estimate?" he said quietly. "Just over 100 million. The words settled heavy in the room. Not dramatic. Just real. The sheriff let out a low whistle, almost under his breath. "That's enough to make people disappear," he said. Caleb nodded. "Or make them show up." The sheriff looked back down at the pages. "Who's Mercer?" he asked. Caleb's expression didn't change. "A man who knew how to build things no one else could see," he said, "and hide them where no one would look. And he left this under your house?" Caleb shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "He didn't leave it." A pause. "He lost it." The sheriff studied him. "You served with him?" Caleb didn't answer right away. The memory hit again. Rotor wash. Night air. A voice cutting through static. "We move now. No second pass." Caleb blinked once, then nodded. Once. The sheriff leaned back in his chair, processing. "Then those men, they worked for someone who knows what this is," Caleb cut in. "Or they're trying to get it before someone else does." The sheriff glanced toward the door. "Either way, they're not stopping." "No." The room went quiet again. Outside, the wind picked up, pushing snow against the windows in soft bursts. The sheriff closed the folder. Carefully. Like it mattered. "All right," he said. Caleb looked at him. The sheriff's expression had changed. Less curiosity, more decision. "We do this right," he continued. "Chain of custody, federal contact, documentation." Caleb shook his head once. Too slow. The sheriff frowned slightly. That's how this works. Caleb stepped closer to the table. That's how it should work, he said. Not how it does. A beat. They already tried to take it, Caleb went on. Next time they won't ask. The sheriff held his gaze. And what are you suggesting? Caleb glanced down at Bruno. The dog lifted his head slightly, eyes sharp despite the fatigue, then back at the sheriff. We control it, Caleb said. Silence again. The kind that forces a decision. The sheriff exhaled slowly through his nose, then nodded. All right, he said. But we don't go dark on this. Not completely. Caleb gave a small nod. Fair. The sheriff stood, moving to a cabinet in the corner. He opened it and pulled out a radio unit, old but functional. He set it on the table. I've got one contact I trust, he said. Former military. Federal liaison now. Doesn't scare easy. Caleb didn't ask for a name. Didn't need it. The sheriff looked back at him. We call him, he said. But we don't say everything. Not yet, Caleb nodded. That's enough. Outside, a distant engine. Faint. But there. Both men froze. Bruno was already on his feet. The sheriff turned his head toward the window. That's not local traffic, he said. Caleb stepped back to his position near the glass, angling just enough to see without being seen. Headlights, far down the road, but coming. More than one. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Yeah, he said quietly. They found the trail. The sheriff moved without hesitation now, reaching for his jacket. Bruno stepped closer to Caleb's side, injured but ready, weight forward despite the bandage. Caleb didn't move, didn't run. He just watched the lights get closer. Because now, it wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about what came next. The headlights grew brighter. 2 vehicles now, not rushing, controlled, like they already knew where they were going. Caleb stepped away from the window. Back room, the sheriff said quietly, already moving. No windows, solid walls. Caleb shook his head once. No. The sheriff stopped. Caleb met his eyes. If we box in, we lose options. A beat. Then the sheriff nodded. All right. He moved to the side wall instead, flipping off the last overhead light. The room dropped into shadow, lit only by the gray wash of evening through the windows. Bruno stood between them now. Not behind, not resting. Standing. The bandage on his shoulder darkened slightly, but he didn't falter. Outside, engines cut, doors opened, footsteps, more than before. Caleb counted silently. 1, 2, 3, 4. The sheriff exhaled slowly. That's not just a recovery team, he muttered. No, Caleb said. It's a cleanup. The first knock didn't come. Instead, a voice. Sheriff, it called out. Calm, familiar. We know you're in there. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. The voice continued. This doesn't have to get complicated. We're here for the materials. That's it. Caleb shifted his stance slightly, angling toward the side exit now. The sheriff noticed. Back door? He asked. Caleb nodded once. On your call. Bruno's ears flicked toward the rear, already tracking. Outside, boots moved across gravel, positioning again. They're splitting, Caleb said under his breath. The sheriff moved to the radio on the table, switched it on. Static crackled. He keyed it once. Dispatch, this is... The signal cut. Dead. not interference. Blocked. The sheriff set the radio down slowly. Figures. Outside, a second voice now. Closer. Last chance, it said. Open the door. Caleb didn't wait. He moved. 3 steps. Side exit. Hand on the latch. Paused. Listened. Nothing on the other side. He opened it just enough to slip through. Cold air hit his face. Bruno followed immediately. The sheriff came behind them, closing the door without a sound. They moved along the side of the building, staying low, keeping the structure between them and the voices. Caleb led, not toward the road, not toward the woods they came from, toward the ridge. Always the ridge. Behind them, the front door splintered. Forced entry. Voices inside now. Fast. Searching. They're in, the sheriff whispered. Caleb didn't slow. They reached the tree line. Disappeared into it. The woods swallowed them again. Branches closed overhead, cutting off what little light remained. They moved uphill in silence. Bruno's breathing heavier now, but steady. Still with them. Always with them. Halfway up, Caleb stopped, turned, looked back. Through the trees, faint beams of light cut through the sheriff's building, searching. Too late. He turned back, continued climbing. At the top of the ridge, they didn't stop. They crossed, dropped down the far side, kept moving until the sounds behind them faded into nothing. Only then did Caleb slow. The sheriff leaned against a tree, catching his breath. "Where now?" he asked. Caleb looked out over the valley below. Lights in the distance. A town. Small. Quiet. Normal. He looked down at Bruno. The dog stood close, head slightly lowered, but eyes still sharp, still ready. Caleb rested a hand on his neck. Not just grounding now. Gratitude. "You did good," he said quietly. Bruno didn't react, just stayed there. Present. Caleb lifted his gaze again. "They wanted the money," he said. "The control." The sheriff nodded. "And now?" Caleb exhaled slowly. "We don't let it disappear again. A beat. We use it." The sheriff studied him. For what? Caleb didn't answer right away. His eyes moved across the valley, then back toward the dark line of woods behind them, then down to Bruno, finally. He spoke. "Men like me," he said. "The ones who didn't come back right." Silence. The kind that didn't need filling. The sheriff nodded once. "Yeah," he said. Caleb adjusted his stance, turning away from the ridge, toward the road that led down. Bruno moved with him. No hesitation. No question. Together. They started walking, and for the first time since the shelter, Caleb didn't look for the nearest exit. He just kept going. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the money, not the house, not even the fight. But the moment a man who had every reason to keep running chose to stand still and build something instead. If you made it this far, I want to ask you something simple. Type 1 in the comments if you believe loyalty like Bruno's still exists. Or type 0 if you think the world lost that a long time ago. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, stick around. Because there are more stories like this waiting. Stories about people who were forgotten until they weren't. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.